The New York Times called her the most famous psychotherapist to have set up couch in Britain since Sigmund Freud. A very warm welcome to the new episode of Ink and Insights. This is your host, Sumit Sarma Samir. This is a Nepal-based podcast, and if you are interested in listening to the thought leaders from around the world on some of the pertinent issues, please subscribe to my channel. I'm extremely pleased to welcome Dr. Susie Orbach in my show today. Dr. Susie Orbach is a globally renowned psychotherapist, psychoanalyst, writer, and co-founder of the Women's Therapy Center in London and in New York. She treated Diana, Princess of Wales, and is a former columnist for The Guardian and is a visiting professor at the London School of Economics. She is the author of many books. Her most recent, In Therapy, The Unfolding Story, is an expanded edition of In Therapy, an annotated version of the BBC series listened to live by 2 million people. Her first book, Fat is a Feminist Issue, became an instant classic and has been continuously in print since 1978. Her another book, Bodies, which won the APA Psychology of Women's Book Prize in 2009, was updated in 2019. She is the recipient of the inaugural British Psychoanalytic Council's Lifetime Achievement Award. She was elected Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature in 2019. And it is such an immense pleasure to welcome Susie in my show today. Susie, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Delighted to be here.
Susie, I really want to start with your very popular book, Fat is a Feminist Issue. This work became instant classic since it first appeared in 1978. What were we thinking when you were writing this book? Had you thought that book would be so popular?
Absolutely not. I began to realize that it was the height of the feminist movement. Women were thinking new thoughts about everything. And I noticed how preoccupied we all were, or many women were, with their bodies, with eating problems, with appetite, with sexuality. And I thought I'd write a pamphlet, because that's what you did in those days. You wrote a pamphlet about something that you thought was important, like the politics of housework or women as witches and the critique. But I wrote a book, and it sold out within a week, which was a bit shocking. And I thought that was all I had to say about it.
Right.
Because it was an argument about the role of women. It was an argument about women's bodies. It was an argument about the food industry and the fashion industry. But now today, if we're looking in Europe, and I don't have the figures for Nepal, the 4 richest people in Europe are all in the fashion or makeup industry, cosmetic industry. It's not the tech billionaires in Europe. It is people who are involved in transforming our bodies or making us feel that we can't really operate unless we transform our bodies or decorate them in certain ways. So something that looked like it wasn't really going to be an enduring interest of mine, because I'm a regular psychotherapist, psychoanalyst who listens to people day in, day out, just continued, I'm afraid.
Right, and I just want to take a bit back and then just want to ask, what in fact inspired you to write Fat is a Feminist Issue?
Well, I was a pretty young and sassy woman, but I would focus on diets and all of that kind of thing. And I thought, that's kind of crazy. Why am I doing this? What is that? It was a personal thing. And I came together with other women. Right. And it was together that we thought, this is a bit nuts. This is like a robbing of our own personal power, that we're always feeling frightened and nervous, and we give to everybody else and we look after them, but we don't know how to look after ourselves. And so that began to be the beginning of a thesis that became Fifi, as I call Fat as a Feminist Issue. And also a solution to the problem, which was to reject dieting, to reject food restriction, to actually return to, which we were able to do then, to our appetites and to question, well, if we're not hungry, what are we hungry for? What is it that's calling to us? Now, I think that's a very different situation than today, where young girls and young boys may not even know what their appetites are, because there are already so many generations of messed up people about their appetites, that gets transmitted. But it wasn't true then. It was a much more small problem. And the kind of problem that I have now would be considered totally normal eating. Sadly.
Right. So the issue today, I think it's as pertinent as it was 26 years ago. How do you like to assess it?
Well, I think it's much more serious. I think I can only really talk now about the UK, but we've seen generations of women, and it's really not to blame them, who've been brought up to think that when they have a baby, the most important thing is to get back into their genes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're frightened about their bodily appetites, and they're frightened about their size, and they may even be frightened about labor. I mean, as we know, in certain countries in the world, many women don't even go into labor. They prepare and have a cesarean section for no medical reason, because they really don't want to ruin their bodies by having to do that. And they maybe have a tummy tuck at the same time. And when you think of the beginnings of life being made where there's anxiety around the body, then you can see that situation is transmitted, passed on with the mother's milk without even being realized, without being recognized. The anxiety around the situation of feeding, which is really crucial between parents and babies, is inflected or contaminated or marked by nervousness. And so it becomes an idiom for people to try to solve that problem, and they try to solve it in the forms in which they've been given it. And so they may make trouble with their own bodies as they grow up.
Right. Susie, and I think that, this particular issue is no more confined with women alone these days. I mean, the body image has been expanded, to men as well. We are conditioned in such a way that you have to look in certain way, you have to carry out yourself in certain way. It has become sort of norm of life, which is quite unfortunate, right?
Right. It's like we've made the body into our commodity, our object, which we have to create, right? We no longer use our bodies to make things, certainly not in the West. Maybe we prepare food, maybe we sweep the floor, but we don't actually make anything. Instead, we produce our bodies. So little girls have cosmetic surgery apps at the age of 3 and 4, which prepares them for transformation. Boys are encouraged to be buff and be fit and be critical of their bodies in the same terrible way. And in whose interest is this? It's in the interests of those industries that benefit, which I'm afraid are those industries that clothe us, that feed us, and that decorate us, as well as the smaller industries like the gym industry, the so-called alternative health, which is just the same as the health market, and all the body transformations. We've got young girls growing up thinking they have to change their labias. We've got boys growing up thinking they have to have a certain kind of pec or cheekbone.
Exactly.
We've got men in China breaking their thigh bones and inserting an extra 2 inches so that they have a more Western look. We have Korean girls changing their eyes. We have girls in Ladakh, you're speaking from Nepal, right? Where Disney entered the world, and the sense of I'm not beautiful took hold, but also not only am I not beautiful, I need to do something about it.
Exactly.
And I'm an old lady. I'm supposed to still be doing something about it. Right? And it's crazy.
Right. It is. Yeah. So can you please discuss the impact of societal beauty standards on individuals' mental health, particularly in relation to body image?
Well, I think discussing it, it's become a constant source of terror for many, many people. So that they think about, it used to be that boys used to think about sex all the time, right? Mm-hmm. But I think girls are thinking about their bodies every 5 minutes, and in a critical way. And I carried out some research with some colleagues at the University of West England, and we were able to show that their performance in exams went down if they saw a picture of the kind of body they were meant to have because of right. So performance can even be undermined by a perception of oneself not being good enough, right? And once you don't feel good enough, you're very liable to other things. And if you didn't feel good enough because of family issues, or you didn't feel good enough for all sorts of issues, then the body becomes a way you try to solve it, but you don't necessarily solve it. You create extra problems. It's kind of criminal what we've done to the body, really criminal.
And in your experience, what are some of the most common misconceptions that people have about body image and its significance?
Well, I think the most common perception is that if you look like X, if you look gorgeous, that life will be okay. But the trouble is, if you're always looking at your body from the outside and evaluating yourself,
exactly,
life can't be okay, because you're always in a suspicious relationship to yourself, and that holds you back from actually expressing things either in a positive or a negative way, which is what human. I mean, we've got this funny thing going on now where we, instead of contributing to society and giving of ourselves, we've become our own focus.
Right.
And perfecting ourselves, which is absolutely insane. I mean, whatever God you believe in, we didn't grow up with a mirror in our face, right?
True.
And our faces are mobile and our bodies are mobile. And it's personality that we're interested in, integrity that we're interested in, imagination that we're interested in.
Exactly.
And it shouldn't be that in order to have those, we have to feel okay in our bodies. Or let me put it this way. If we hadn't had our bodies attacked, we might be able to get on with the rest of life.
Right. Perhaps we would have enough time to look ourselves more inwardly rather than, trying to step up and adjust ourselves in a way that society has sort of fixed certain standards in a way. So that
and I think it's so hard for young people now, because social media is all about performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And having a certain way of being. I mean, for the last 8-9 years, the cameras come with filters of different grades of beauty.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
So you're not even yourself, right? And that you have to have two selves, the self that you are and the self that you project. It's all very... Exactly. I mean, we are living in an alternate reality, frankly.
Absolutely. So in that context, how can we really promote a positive body image and self-esteem in children and in adolescents?
Well, I think we need to help new parents, new mothers, because not pass on, and I'm not blaming them, but not passing on their own distress, but also get help for their own distress, to introduce children to their appetites and to enjoy them.
Right.
To stop young women having Botox because their faces don't move and their children don't learn the correct emotional expressions. Mm-hmm. We need to help teachers not focus so much on nutrition, but more on emotional health. Right. Because
what's the difference, if I may ask, nutritional and
I think in nutrition, you're saying you should eat this, you should eat that, you should eat this, you should eat that. Mm-hmm. Right. Fine, that's fine. But also, do we have any kind of teaching about the 3 R's of your emotions, what you're feeling, why you might be feeling it, what's confusing about what you're feeling, what you do about it? Life is full of richness, including sadness. And we have a culture that says, have a great day. Well, often you're not having a great day. Often you're having a difficult day or a dismal day, or you feel sad. We don't recognize that kind of thing, which is much more nourishing emotionally and allows us to be inside as well as outside. So we focus instead on other categories, which I think are kind of disturbing.
Right. Right.
But it's it's all basic learning of what is it that we want, and how can we allow ourselves to find it? And lots of things that we want are not the thing that we really want. We think we want that because of the cultural stories.
Yeah. And also, Susie, perhaps you'd agree when I said that, digital age kind of put individual in such a frame that they're always sort of competing to, be or to be seen in certain way. And then thereby they're creating a couple of self for themselves instead of really introspecting and looking into their own self.
Well, they're doing both, right? They're really not engaging with others.
Yeah.
Or, as you say, reflecting on themselves. It's a kind of very weird form of individualism. It's late capitalism's individualism, where you become the center of the world, but
right,
without any power, because unless you happen to do that for a job, being a movie star or being a model, what the hell? You shouldn't have to be a scientist in a lab worrying about what you look like, or a doctor or a journalist.
Right. So mankind seems to have gone more complex from simplicity. So,
do you think it's more complex or more stupid?
Well, I mean, we'll leave that aside for now, because people would have perhaps different interpretation on that. But it's really very fascinating to see how we kind of, as individuals and as societies, are heading towards. So on that context, I'd just like to pinpoint on this. How does the digital age, particularly social media, affect individuals' body image and self-esteem particularly?
Well, I don't live there, but what I understand is that it's like seeing thousands and thousands of ads a day.
Yeah.
And so everything has the flatness of it, but it's visual culture, but it's not engagement. It's sort of a washing of a person in imagery that is just perplexing. We know imagery is very powerful. Religious imagery, icons, advertisements, but this is like being under the tutelage of visual culture, kind of nonstop, and it makes it hard to find yourself there unless you can recognize yourself. And recognizing yourself by age, by ethnicity, by race, by class, and then you have to somehow reproduce that, which is
exactly
a little bit crazy. I mean, it's a terrible burden.
I think so.
I have grandchildren, and I see them already posing for cameras all the time. They don't know that there's any. That is because their parents take pictures of them. The whole world takes pictures, and it's like they know how to present.
Right.
Rather than be.
Right. And how can therapists kind of navigate cultural differences when addressing body image concerns with clients from diverse backgrounds? I mean,
well, I think the problem is that diversity has collapsed in this.
You
right?
think so?
Yeah, I think that what the West has done is sell body hatred all over the world. I've seen it.
Right.
And whether it's the theft of different fashion traditions or the theft of different whatever people's characteristics and the supplanting of those. I mean, when I was in China 10 years ago, huge billboards advertising clothes made in China on westernized bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so therapists, if they're any good, have to be culturally sensitive. And you have to be able to work with how somebody lives with themselves, given how difficult the world can be for them. But you also, I think, can encourage some kind of solidarity with other people, so that it doesn't just become an individual struggle that you can never get out of.
Right.
And therapists have to fight within government to make contributions, to say, you need to change this. You need to, I mean, there's many different ways that therapists could work with governmental agencies or with big businesses to transform both visual culture, but also to understand the emotional reasons why people do things that aren't in their best interests.
Right. And do you think this is happening, Susie, right now?
Very, very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think what you see more here is nudge economics, which is kind of behavioral rather than understanding why women go back into, let's say, being battered after they've been battered. Well, you know, there's not a psychological understanding of what that's about because there's no understanding. Right. So I think these are much deeper questions which you probably can't explore now, but absolutely. Tiny little bits are opening, but not very much.
Right. And how do you think the healthcare professionals such as doctors and nurses can contribute to the promoting of positive body image among their patients?
Well, it depends where they're located. I mean, I think, you know, if they have somebody who's troubled with food, they could say, do you know what hunger is? Have you ever felt it? Or have you eaten in advance of it? Just a little question like that could help.
Right. And yeah.
I think little delicate interventions are what health professionals can do.
Right.
Like help mums help the new mums, the new parents be less anxious rather than saying you've got to do this, you've got to do that.
Right. Right. Perhaps they also need a lot of sensitivities to understand.
Yes, and they need it themselves because doctors are part of the same population.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, the number of young doctors I see who've got complete plastic surgery on their faces, I just find that shocking, really.
And what advice would you give to someone who's actively working to improve their body image and self-confidence?
Well, I think two things. I think they might remember what bodies are for, which is that bodies allow us to move and dance and be fluid and think about all the capacities that bodies have and what the different parts of your body are able to do, just at a superficial level, you know, what your hands, and you don't need to know what every cell structure is about, but also to think about the environment as potentially nourishing rather than as an enemy that you have to arm yourself against.
Right.
And you know, what does it mean to think that your body has a signaling system that tells you when to pee? Mm-hmm. It tells you when to laugh. It tells you when to sneeze. It also can tell you when to eat. It's actually very sophisticated if you don't mess around with it. And if you look at pictures of yourself from 5 years ago when you thought you were, you look at them now and you think, God, I was fine then. Why did I hate myself then? Mm-hmm. It's a very active lesson in thinking, perhaps I'm projecting something onto me that is too hurtful and I could do something very different now.
Right.
Could start to try and accept myself now.
Right. And in your opinion, what are the key factors that could contribute to a person's overall sense of self-worth and identity?
I guess the main thing for me is friendships and making a contribution to society in some way.
Right. And how do you approach, working with clients who may struggle with accepting their bodies due to chronic illness or disability?
I think that's actually easier.
Okay. How do you do it?
Because I think if you listen to the pain,
right,
and you listen to their experience, and they hear themselves as they tell you, and they're being listened to, it doesn't mean it goes away, but it means you can provide a context together of trying to understand it. I think recognition is what we all need.
Right. And what is the role of, trauma in shaping individuals' perceptions of their bodies and their relationship with food?
Well, the thing is, trauma has become such an overall word. I mean, trauma is, we all have traumatic experiences. Some of us have them in a social way, through war. Some of them have it, some of us have it because there's wars in our family. I mean, I don't think I feel good about commenting in a simplistic way about trauma. I think it has to be understood in its context, and then you have to risk being non-traumatized when you have been traumatized, because it can become a way of protecting yourself. I mean, that's too superficial, actually. I don't really quite mean that. What I mean is we have to find out what the story is that the person has been living with that has made them frightened or fearful.
Right. And Susie, in the given context, I feel, I could be wrong in my assumption, but I feel that, the field of psychotherapy have immense role to play in the days to come. So how do you feel that this field is evolving in its approach to addressing body image concerns in the coming years?
I'm not sure. I think it's, when I started to do it, I was teased for being interested. Now it's become a specialty. But the problem is that I was in Australia once, and I was speaking at a conference, and there was several thousand body image specialists, but they'd never had any therapy themselves. Okay. So they were being trained to be specialists in something without having explored their own histories and their own relationship to it. So for me, there's both an acceleration of the thing called therapy, which isn't therapy.
Right.
And the acceleration of specialties that they are specialties, but they're kind of behavioral rather than understood.
Yeah. As far as I understand, the therapist is a human being who is directly concerned and interact with the other human being. And, we are living in the age of machine, which is kind of overpowering the entire society now. In that context, where do you see the whole field kind of heading towards?
Well, I still think people really like to be with people.
Right.
And yes, a good AI program can listen to you, and you can feel listened to. They did that in the 70s. I remember that. I can't remember. It was Liza. I can't remember what the name of the robotic therapist was. Doesn't mean isn't helpful, because all she's doing in that is basically saying things back to you. But the value of human relationships, that's what we're all in search of, is being understood, being seen, being challenged.
Right.
We don't want to just yes, do we? We want to think more broadly. We want to feel more broadly.
Absolutely.
We want to cry and sweat and be engaged with one another. Right. We don't only want to be superficial.
Absolutely, Susie. The only problem I feel that, there's the age difference between you and I feel that, as far as I understand, is that certain narrative sort of, comes in every age, and that overpowers you, and you live within that narrative for a certain period of time, towards the end, just to realize that whatever you have been doing is not worth it, right? So
there's a lot of sorrow in modern life, right?
Right, absolutely.
A lot of different sorrows.
Right, Susie. So before I finally wrap up, my final question is, what motivates you to continue your work in psychotherapy, and what do you hope to achieve in the future?
I have no idea. I think it's the best job in the world. I learn about everything. I think it keeps me. I get the temperature of what's going on in people, and I have the privilege of being close to people, and I learn new things every day. Right.
Susie, thank you so much. With that, even I had an opportunity to be close to you, to get to know you, to interview you.
Thank you very much.
It's such an honor. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.